So hi, it's Nancy Schick, attorney, mediator, and conflict resolution coach in New York City. My goal is to keep you out of court and build your conflict resolution skills. So I am doing this live video, this kind of webinar to walk people through some of the conflicts that are showing up still. I think most of us are dealing with all kinds of things every day, no matter how much the pandemic situation has improved where we are, we're still dealing with a lot of other things. So even though things are opening up, definitely a challenge still. So I'm doing Facebook Live with this for the first time in several months. So just bear with me as I work through some of the little logistical things. I did come on early, but yay, always have a few little things that show up. And it looks like it's not actually working. So I'm just going to end the Facebook Live. Actually, I'm not. Maybe it's going to let me do this. So I apologize. This is not the way it normally works. But part of being a conflict resolution specialist is that we get used to this, right? We just adapt and we keep going. Okay, so the main reason I chose to do this particular webinar is last week I was asked to do a demonstration of the 30-year conflict resolution process in one of my coaching groups. And we had such a powerful discussion and it was just so authentic, so powerful and emotional. And yet we saw some breakthroughs. So of course I wanted to share that with you. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I have written a book. This book is available on Amazon. It's called DIY Conflict Resolution, 7 Choices and 5 Actions of a Master, or as I say in the introduction, a master in training, because I'm still in training. I've been doing this for years, and definitely the pandemic has brought some new things that I wasn't expecting and some new challenges, right? So I think that's what all of us are dealing with at this point, and it's fine, right? Wherever you are is fine. I've said that throughout the past several months, because even today, I can tell you that I'm having a rougher day than I've had for probably the past week or so. I had been making some progress. It sounded like I might be going back on campus with one of my clients who actually made me employee, and I have another one who has offered me another course that I could end up teaching. So things looked like they might start moving again. I like the work I've been doing, even though some of my clients are really dealing with tough issues still, just trying to decide, can they keep their businesses open? So I wanted to help you if you're dealing with some of that, and maybe we can cause a breakthrough for you. So I'm watching to see who comes into the room. I'm not going to call people out, in part because I know that some of you might be dealing with something you don't want all that public. So you're welcome to put, if you're on the Zoom feed, you're welcome to put your comments in the chat. If you're familiar, hopefully by now you're relatively familiar with Zoom, and you know that there's a chat feature, and you can put your questions right there in the chat, and I will just work through the conflict resolution process with that particular issue. So again, a couple of things are, if you're not familiar with Zoom, just hover your mouse, whether you're using a trackpad or an actual mouse, and just hover it beneath your picture, and you'll see the navigation bar, and you'll see a chat feature. So you can put your comments right there in the chat, and I will respond to them if you would rather do it that way. You can also, if you want the confidentiality, you can hide your name. So you just go into the settings for your account and you can hide your name. If you have your name displayed, we can't see that on the video replay. So what you could do is just when you ask your question, state that you'd like to remain anonymous. I'm being, again, very mindful because I do know from the demonstration I did last week that had we not been in a group where we had already agreed to keep everything confidential, there was a lot more at risk for in particular one of the participants that shared a very painful story about a family member. And I will admit that one hit a little close to home, and I'll just share with you very briefly what was going on in that situation. That does hit close to home for me is that after the participants' parents had died, which unfortunately we've seen a lot of here in the U.S., here in New York this year, the family kind of broke apart. And we see that so often. It's one of the reasons that I don't practice family law generally. I do some coaching in family disputes and in divorces where there are businesses, but I stick mostly in the employment realm, in part because I know my own limitations right now. I've got some of this going on in my own family since my mother has died. And similar to the participant that shared, siblings just saw things differently. And then when the estate settled, by the time that occurred, it was pretty much just this, I don't want to be a part of the activities around the family anymore. Pretty much the estate has settled. We're not obligated to keep in touch. And this was very difficult for the person who shared the story. So what we did is, and the same thing I do with all of these conflicts, is we started with choice number one, which was to forgive yourself. And I said, you want to just forgive yourself that your family's not perfect. I've had to do that for my own benefit. And families aren't perfect. You aren't perfect. You're going to struggle, and that is entirely okay. It's how you manage that situation that matters the most. So the first thing we always do in any conflict is just say, it's not your fault. It doesn't mean you can't take action, but just blaming and demonizing yourself, just like demonizing the other person, isn't going to move you forward. And I'm all about action. So you'll notice that a lot of my talks are about taking action. And when we get into the 5 actions, obviously that's what that will be about also. So second, so to acknowledge yourself for taking any action at all to try and resolve this conflict. This is really difficult because a lot of times what we want to do, and I think we've been doing this through the pandemic, myself included, with certain things, is we want to just kind of hide out, wait it out, see if it gets better, and hope for the best. And ignoring things and hoping that they're going to disappear is just not a great strategy. It's also not the best way to empower yourself, right? So you're much more empowered when you are the one kind of controlling the action, right? So if you just think about it, whenever you're taking action, and not reflexive action, but intentional action towards something, even if it's not going perfect, there is something that says, wow, I have power over my life. So that's why we get into acknowledging yourself for any action at all, even if it's imperfect. So choice number 3 is to forgive the world for having and creating conflicts. This is normal for everyone. And in the context of the pandemic and families, we're all being affected by the pandemic, and we all have families. So we can share that and navigate it together. We can also recognize that it's part of what helps us grow as human beings. And as difficult as it can be sometimes, that friction is what pushes us beyond what we think is possible. And I'm a huge advocate of that. And as I'm doing this today, I also thank you for participating, for watching, and helping me take action to move beyond the conflicts that I'm feeling right now. So choice number 4 is just to free the emotions. I am doing that today, and I said I wouldn't judge, right? So you'll see right here, I do have my little glass of wine. I started my day at 6 o'clock and this morning, and so yeah, I said we put well, I shouldn't say we, but my nephew put my mother's house on the market today. It's just he's outgrown it, and I'm a little emotional, so I'm giving myself some space to free the emotions. I've had a few tears today. I've had a lot of laughter, had a lot of good memories, but it's a milestone to see our family home move into, more than likely it will move into a new family, and we're the only family that's been in it since my parents purchased it. It's the first time it's been on the market since they bought it. So I'm allowing those emotions to just come through. If I block them, it's kind of like when you try to, and this is going to sound a little gross, but when you try and hold in a burp or a sneeze, right? And then sometimes what happens with the sneeze, we'll go with that one, is that you try to hold it in and it makes your eyes water and it makes your head feel really full, right? So we don't want to do that. You can imagine if you're doing that with emotions and you keep doing that over time, you do feel like you're going to explode. And I've done that as well. Most people that know me know that I did that for a long time in a situation where I was being regularly abused emotionally, physically, mentally, right, and sexually, and financially also, right. So I was in a very difficult situation and didn't know how to get myself out of it. And suicide seemed like an option at one moment. So that's one reason although I joke about having a little glass of wine, it's one little glass of wine. I do not encourage you, if you know that you have challenges around alcohol, I obviously don't encourage that you lean on that, especially in the pandemic and with everything else going on. But free those emotions, because we definitely don't want you going into that dark place where you think you have no other options. You always have options. And if nothing else, I want you to know that you can always reach out to me and I will help you see some new possibilities and see some new options, because I never want you going in the place that I went. And yet I also understand what it is to be in such a dark place. And even when you have lovely people around you and you have people who love you and support you, when you're in that dark place, you can't always see it. So another thing I've learned over the years is how to recognize when I'm starting to go into the downward spiral. And the first thing I do is free those emotions. Sometimes it's dropping a bunch of F-bombs, which don't normally come out of my mouth unless I'm really, really angry. And other times it's tears. Sometimes I want to go and beat the heck out of a softball, which is a lot harder to do these days. My batting cage is closed. My Sunday game is canceled until further notice. But I'm learning to find some new things to allow whatever expression of emotion I need in order to get to choice number 5, which is to clear my mind. So that's kind of a weird thing to say, right? Because as you'll hear me say repeatedly, the experts tend to estimate that we have something like 30,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day, the average human does. So clearing your mind, you're not actually clearing it per se. It's not like we're giving you amnesia or anything like that. We're not going to create brain damage. But what we're trying to get at is that you control those thoughts, right? So if you think about that, the 30,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day, you're not paying attention to all of them. So just briefly, you can do that right now. Just take a minute. Just don't pay attention to anything you're thinking, right? And this is what meditation is about. It's about just getting to where you recognize that your mind is just chatter, 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 chatter all the time, but you don't have to listen to it. You can control your mind to a certain degree, and you definitely can control the actions that come from the thoughts that you have. This is especially important right now because in the context not just of the pandemic, but when now we move into one of the other hot issues right now, which is racial and social justice, a lot of people are having difficulty navigating those conversations. And so this is where I say clearing your mind is so important, right? Because you can just have a thought, right? I have them. I have thoughts about somebody who is, you know, being obnoxious, not wearing a mask, smoking weed on the street corner, maybe drinking on the street corner, not socially distancing. And my immediate thought is, what a jerk. And then the next thought might be, oh, it's always the older white man, or maybe it's not that, maybe it's the woman with her fancy clothes, or maybe it's something else, right? My brain is doing that, but I'm not acting on it, right? I'm just recognizing, oh, my brain did that. So what? I don't have to believe everything that my brain is generating. If you think about it kind of like your computer or the internet, that's probably an even better one. The internet's churning out all kinds of information, right? You don't want to pay attention to all of it. Hopefully you've figured that out by now. So you want to just clear your mind to the extent that you're open to, your mind does what it does, but you are in charge because this is about your life. And if your mind is sending you things that aren't helpful, then you definitely don't want to act on them, right? That seems like a simple concept, but just like when you go into those depressive situations or anger where your emotion is extremely high, you'll find that a lot of things that you know to do, you don't always do. The good thing is, and that's why I wrote the book, is that you can learn how to do this with practice. And then what happens is your brain starts to automatically do things that you want it to do that are much more effective, or at least you can slow yourself down. And, you know, we could get into semantics. Are you slowing your brain down? Is it slowing down? It doesn't matter. The main thing is that you want to take control back. So choice number 6 is to assume that you know nothing about anything. So, right, we've cleared our mind now. We've told our brain to like, just let me observe. Let me get this new information, take a fresh look at things so that I can see if I'm missing anything. You know, especially when we're in conflict at a certain age, it's probably not a brand new conflict that we've never seen before. With this particular person that I was talking about earlier that shared about the family member and the breakdown of the siblings, it was not unusual, right? These were not siblings that were extremely close anyway. There had been a lot of fractured family experiences. They lived apart, so they didn't have that closeness that you might have with somebody that lives nearby, that you have Sunday dinner with, or Wednesday dinner, or frequent holidays together, right? It's harder to maintain that closeness when you're geographically distant, and that's what happens. So what we tend to default, right, because this crazy brain of ours that plays lots of tricks on us, this person was experiencing that the sibling maybe was acting a certain way based on the past, right? There are these assumptions that we start to make, especially with family members, and I think probably especially with siblings. I'm guilty of that, is, you know, seeing something that a sibling is doing and immediately calling back something that happened like 30 years ago and go, oh, right, you know, my sister Jeannie did that, or my sister Lisa always does this. Oh, my sister Judy, who I'm very close to, is great, you know, and she's always great. And then occasionally she'll surprise me with something that like, oh, I didn't expect you to think that or you to say that. And this is where we get ourselves into trouble, right? Because we start assuming that we know kind of everything about someone and how they're going to operate under every circumstance based on the past. But we're human beings that are constantly growing and changing. So that's what I invited this particular person last week to take a look at, is that just look at your sister where she is right now and where she might be based on what she's told you. And it doesn't mean anything except for what she said, because even when we think that someone is saying, I need my space, you might think, oh, well, you don't actually need space. What's going to help you is for us to talk this out right now. But if someone has said that's what they want, you need to honor that, because otherwise you're not respecting what they asked for and where they think they are right now. And that's all you have to work from. So that's what I invited him to do, is just assume you know nothing about your sister and accept her request to have space from the family right now. It doesn't mean you have to stop loving her. It just means you're not going to be able to have conversation with her. And again, the reason this hits home for me, and I did get a little emotion even while coaching this person, I have that going on with one of my sisters, where I don't feel like I can keep myself mentally and physically safe when dealing with her and her husband. But it doesn't mean I've stopped loving her. It doesn't mean that I don't want the absolute best life for her. I just don't know how to have her in my life right now to where we're close. And that's what I invited him to just assume, that it meant nothing about how he was as a brother, who he was as a person, and how his sister even saw him. She has her own life, has her own situations, and we don't always know what people are going through because we don't always share everything. And that's something I've had to learn also with people around me, is I have a tendency to try and fix everything myself and then tell everybody later about my champion story, right? And I think that the society tends to teach us to do that, but it's not always helpful. So, I want you to just think about those things too, and just, it's kind of comical, right? I'm telling you to think about things because we've cleared our mind and we're going to assume nothing. And now we're just going to say, let me try this. Nancy sounds a little crazy. Some of the things she says are conflicting. I'm not really sure, but just go with me a little. Try something new, because if you don't try something new, there's a chance that you're going to keep repeating this same conflict. So choice number 7 is to listen with your third ear. You go, what is your third ear? You look in the English word heart. It's right in the center. E-A-R, right? H-E-A-R-T. Ear is in the center of that word. So it's about listening compassionately, or as I've learned to just describe it throughout the pandemic, and with my clients who are rehumanizing their workplaces on entirely new levels, is listen with your third ear for the hurts you can heal. Because when we're really listening to someone, they're almost always communicating something about what they really need. And in the context of the person with the sibling issue, the sibling was saying, I need space from the family right now. It doesn't mean that she's never coming back. She just needs space to process whatever's going on in her life. And that's where we moved in then to the 5 actions. So, and by the way, if you're interested in having one of these bookmarks, you're welcome to just shoot me an email and say, yeah, send me one. My book is on Amazon. I have the online courses. I'm always willing to help you work through some things, because I want you to be free from the things that hold you back. And I know right now in particular, there's a lot of fear, and it feels like there are just obstacles everywhere. So we're going to move into action now. And this is what I did with the person with the sibling issue. Is action 1 is we defined that conflict very succinctly. And that was an interesting exercise. I always find, things come out differently with every situation. And in that particular dispute, the first conflict that we defined was that he and his sister disagreed about whether they should be in contact since their parents had died. And as we started working through, well, what is it you really want, which is action number 2, is identifying his interest in it, and then trying to start thinking about what's really going on for her. But we really focused with him. And I started to see like some resistance, which usually tells me I'm getting somewhere, right? So it started with, well, I want to be close to my family. I want a close family. I think we're supposed to be that way. It should be that way. And that's it's a trigger word, not in the context of, the snowflakes and all of that language. I really am not a fan of labeling people and dismissing them. But the should is always a red flag for me, because I then can see that this is about what someone else is benchmarking their life by somebody else's standard. And that comparison almost always leads us down the rabbit hole of I'm not enough. And so since we're humans and we tend to find that we're not enough, that's one of our defaults. I like to move people away from the shoulds. And you've probably heard that before, that we're shoulding on ourselves, right? And shoulding all over yourself just makes a big old mess. So now if you haven't heard that before, hopefully you'll remember that. It's pretty vivid. And when you hear yourself saying should, just stop and go, wait, who says I should? Who says families need to be close and share every holiday and agree on everything? It makes for great TV, especially around the holidays. It makes for great Christmas sales, right? Or Hanukkah or whatever holidays that you celebrate. It makes for great sales, during Thanksgiving and bringing people together for fancy meals, right? It's great for marketing to make you feel like you should have the perfect family. But most of us don't. Or maybe we do. Like, who determines what perfect is? And that's what I want you to get, just like I was coaching him to get. So ultimately, we got stuck on this identifying the interest. So identifying what mattered most to him in this conflict. Ultimately, we discovered that a big part of what was going on for him is this breakdown in his family was causing him to question his competence and his abilities with his work, because he works with people about, around their relationships and helps them have better relationships. And I laugh, not because I think it's funny, but because I identify. For the longest time as a mediator and a conflict resolution coach, I thought my life had to be perfect. All of my relationships had to be perfect. And so I wasn't ready until that happened. And I was on a call the other night because I'm in a couple of mastermind groups, and a lovely gentleman, shout out to Winston Faircloth, who reminded me that we are, as coaches and leaders and mentors, managers, business owners, however we are leading other people, we're typically only a couple of steps ahead of the people that we're working with. And that's what I got for myself, as well as for this particular participant in this meeting that was allowing me to coach him through the 30-year process, is he didn't have to be perfect, and neither do you, right? It's okay that your life isn't perfect, because let's say your life had been perfect as of March 1st of this year. My guess is that the pandemic brought you some new conflicts, and that's okay. It didn't change any of the things that you had gained. It didn't change any of the skills. It just means you need some different skills now. It's similar to when you buy your first home or you buy a car, and suddenly you have different things that you need to learn to make that work well for you. There are different things that need to be fixed, different things that break, right? It's part of what happens. So don't expect to do something and then have it be perfect forever. And I know you know this, you just forget because you're always shoulding on yourself. So after he identified that that was what was going on for him, we went back to defining the conflict. And we recognized that the real conflict was not about him and his sister. The real conflict was he disagreed with himself to a large degree about whether he had everything it takes to be good in his profession. So then we could start breaking it down from there of like, what is it that's most important to you about being great at your job? And when we stopped talking about his sister, right? And it was really fascinating to see this unfold, because I think so many of us are dealing with that. Maybe we're blaming the pandemic, we're blaming the loss of a job, we're blaming something external, when really what's going on, as it's always going to go on, is your experience of yourself. And that doesn't mean there's not external conflict that we need to work on. It doesn't mean there aren't conflicts with other people that we can't work on. I do that regularly as a mediator, where I bring two people in the same room and we work through similar conversations about, what did you expect when you started this? And in this particular exercise, it was, what did you expect when you launched your business? What is it you wanted? What is it you needed? What did you think would happen? What did you believe? What do you still believe about what you should be? And we started working through some of those exercises. And then we could start moving into playing with the possibilities of this conflict resolving, right? And what it really comes down to for him is, what would it look like if you started respecting yourself and your skills and your competence, regardless of what was going on around you, if you really started to trust yourself? And then we could move into action number 5, which is to, action number 4, which is to create the future with an action plan, right? And this is where we get into specific measurable actions that where we have specific measurable results, right? So we want to be able to see the progress. And what we tend to do is we make it time bound, right? We say, I will call a client that I've been afraid to ask business from. I'll call them by Friday, right? It will be, I will talk to my spouse about all of this that I've been feeling around the need to have a better relationship with my sister, and just sharing that with someone close to him could cause a breakthrough also. And that's what we're looking at, is at least 3 actions that he could take to move his life in a new direction. And then action number 5 is to stay on par. Not quite an action, but it's very specifically designed and put in the process, because I want you to recognize that you have to plan, act, revise, and repeat until you get the results that you want. This is not a one-shot deal. When we're dealing with relationships and fears and our deepest conflicts, it's not like you can just go and buy a pair of shoes and suddenly, ta-da, I don't have any more foot problems because I got the perfect pair of shoes, right? And if you use the shoe analogy even, your shoes are going to wear out, so you're going to need another pair at some point. So, and you might need a different type based on how your body changes. So I put that in because I want you to get that this is a process, and a life process. It's just like your diet plan, all right? Doing a quick fix diet is not going to sustain you. And when we're talking about peace, in my years over at the UN, that was one of the things we talked about too, is that the absence of war is not the true definition of peace, and definitely not sustainable peace. So we want to get into a deeper conversation and create new habits where peacemaking is part of who we are. And I am definitely in this conversation right now because I want peace just like you do. So looking now at the comments, I know that was a long story and going through the exercise, but I wanted to make sure that we at least had a good example in case we didn't have any comments. It's always good to give an example of something that's going on. So looking now at what do you do when you, yeah, when you're repeating the same thing of kind of hiring the same employee over and over again, or kind of having the same, it could play out in having the same conversation with employees over and over again, or usually it's specific ones that you're having challenges with. And I do work a lot on that. And so we can very easily go back to the DIY conflict resolution process, right? And the first thing that I want you to do is just forgive yourself. Been there, been running my business now for 17 years. I've made extraordinary hires, and I've made extraordinary and not as productive ways, right? Not as happy and joyful and effective ways, right? So they're all extraordinary because they definitely stick out in my mind, but you know, there's a full range. So just forgive yourself. It's normal, but you'll get better, because just like this process is that the more you practice it, the more your brain starts to do it more naturally. You'll start to recognize the types of people that work really well in certain positions, and you'll recognize the red flags earlier. And you know, this is part of why people will tell you, and I'm sure you've heard it if you've been running a business for any length of time, that you want to hire slowly and fire quickly. And that's harsh, but again, you know, it's because we'd like you to have like quick little things that your brain can process on a, you know, in a moment's instant, that you have to make a decision, just something you can call on to say, wait, slow down. Oh, right, did I hire too quickly? And that's what we find a lot of times when we've got these situations, is that we hire because all of a sudden we had an explosion of business, or somebody's friend needed a job, or a friend of a friend, or someone's nephew, whatever it might be, and you think you're helping them out. So just forgive yourself if any of those apply, and then acknowledge yourself that you spoke up. Thank you for that. Because now you can move into, like, maybe there's something you can do to create a new future. Forgive the world, and in this situation, forgive the employee, or employees if it's multiple ones. There was something that had you hire them, something you liked about them, but maybe you weren't thorough in matching them to the job that you needed done. And if you're a small business, I see this a lot, and I've been there myself, is when I was super, super busy with my litigation practice, and I was running around to all kinds of different courthouses and places all over the state, I needed somebody that was very independent. And although people think they're independent, right? No one says, oh yes, I'm very, very dependent. I need somebody on top of me all the time. Very rarely will you have an employee that says that. Most people say, I don't like micromanagers and I work very well independently, but that doesn't mean that they have the skills to work independently in the job that you need them to do. So you have to plan for training, and just forgive yourself and forgive the world if those two things didn't come together. Number 4, free the emotions, right? If you're angry, it's okay. Don't take it out on the employee. Don't take it out on your spouse or your friends or other employees. Just remove yourself from the situation. If you're one of my clients, you can always call me, text me, those kinds of things. We talk through it. I want you to free those emotions. It's okay. 2 things with emotions and thoughts that I just thought of that I've gotten in one of my trainings is thoughts and emotions are not reliable tests for reality. So you may feel like you're an emotional mess and you can't control your anger, or you're never going to get through this. And your brain's probably telling you all kinds of things about how you're going to fail. Tell your brain, shh. Okay, you're not that. Your thoughts and feelings are not a reliable test for reality. You're way more competent than you think. So free those emotions and clear your mind, right? Tell your brain, shh, shh, shh. I know you're doing your thing, just like a computer's constantly processing things. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to watch all the code go up and down the screen. So do that with your brain, not paying attention to all of it. Assume you know nothing about the situation, right? So you're going to go back to the first, you want to go back to what is it that you really need from your employees. And if you don't have job descriptions, if you don't have clear metrics for how you measure success, just like we measure your action plan in the 5 actions to resolve conflict, you want to do the same thing with your employees. You want to help them measure so that they can see when they're actually meeting the goals. And we need that for, as human beings, we like to see progress. It keeps us encouraged. So it's one of the other reasons you do that. And the big one, always, is listen with your third ear for the hurts that you can heal. Because just like you're probably frustrated and concerned and you have fears and maybe some anger, your employee, unfortunately, is probably going through the same thing. If nothing else, they're absorbing your frustration and anger, and that exacerbates in the workplace. But when we rehumanize, and like you said, a lot of my clients are learning to do this again, because working from home has been a big challenge for different people based on technology setup, technology skills, whether they have kids or other people they're responsible for there in the home with them, and they're still trying to get the job done. Right? And then you're seeing them sometimes on Zoom calls, and you're seeing their kids walk behind them, or their dog or their cat jumps on the desk, right? So many different things that they're doing, and they're still getting work done. So maybe it's not to the level that you need it done, but when you go back to them, just instead of saying, why aren't you doing a good job, be able to very specifically go to them and say, hey, things aren't really working out really as well as I thought. And I want to make this better. Here's what I need, right? Because you've gone back now and you've looked at exactly what you need these employees to do based on what's going on right now. So this is another skill, right? Is any other relationship, you have to do this, and you have to do it at work too. You hired them to do a job, but the job is not the same. It's not exactly the same. You're not exactly the same. They're not exactly the same. Even if you just hired them earlier this year, right? There's a lot of things always happening. So just checking in, looking at whether what you laid out for them to succeed in, what projects they were working on, things have probably changed to where maybe you need new metrics, maybe they need new training, or maybe they just need some reassurance. So bring that third ear into the conversation and start there, and recognize that they're human beings that probably want to do a good job. Now, that may not look to you as though they want that, and there are people that just don't want to work. That's possible. And in those situations, by listening with your third ear and treating them like human beings, it usually becomes pretty obvious where they are on that range, right, on the spectrum of, are they fully dedicated employees that just need more help, or are they people that see you as just a paycheck until they can go out and file for unemployment again, or find a better job, or whatever, right? So you'll be able to figure that out by giving them all the tools to succeed. And when you do that, it's what I tell most of my clients, is that you set them up to self-select either success or termination. And at that point, it's not on you. You don't have to feel bad. You've given them every opportunity to succeed. So if you're continuing to hire this person over and over again, that's on the spectrum of I don't really want to work, first make sure that's who they are and that you've given them every opportunity to work and succeed. And then if not, they will self-select and we'll move into the next thing, right? So similar to what happens with the gentleman that had the sibling issue, what I've discovered with different clients is a lot of times it has a lot more to do with how they're relating to their business. Now, it doesn't mean that the conflict doesn't occur between the two people. It could be you as the employer and you and are having the conflict with the employee. But again, you have clear metrics. You say the conflict is I, the employer, disagree with the employee about whether they're doing a good job. And then we stop, right? We just stop. Because now we've confined it to this is what's going on, is are you doing a good job? And now we move into action 2, identifying the interests. So It may be that you say, well, I expected that you would come in on time every day, ready to work. You'd be in your uniform if you have a uniform. You'd be kind to your coworkers. You would do the projects that were on your calendar for the day, and you would do them with a certain level of skill. I believed that you had the skill to do that. I thought you were a self-starter, right? Because maybe they said, I'm a self-starter, right? I don't like micromanagement, but I'm not seeing that, and there's a conflict here. Then you would give the employee the opportunity to tell what they thought the job was going to be like. And what happens in these conversations is, again, sometimes it's me and coaching the employer and the employee, then it becomes a different conversation that I'm not always involved in. But in the context of them coming together, it ends up being this exchange of expectations that weren't met. And through that, you can start to see where the gaps are in knowledge and skill, and you can start making really powerful decisions about whether you have the resources and the time and the patience and the deadlines that can meet a retraining environment. Maybe you need to send them out to training. Maybe you need to have somebody else that's already skilled to train them. But you start to see actions you can take, which is why then we move to action number 3, where you start playing with the possibilities of having this resolved. So, usually in the context of employment, it's like, if you could have this resolved in any way possible, it would look like you and the employee going to work, getting along because the work's getting done, and you're seeing results, and you're getting to celebrate that the business is advancing. You're making more money. Maybe you give bonuses. Success makes it better, right? But if you don't define success, you don't know whether you met it. Which brings us to action number 4. Create the future. So after you have that conversation, you start identifying where the gaps are. That's when you can create the action plan. And I want you to approach it, again, with the third ear listening, of instead of it being discipline, it's more of a partnership, right? That conversation about identifying interests in the exchange and playing with the possibilities of this working out better. It's thinking of employment as partnership, not control. Because if you create that environment, it's been my experience with my clients and in my own business that employees come to a job with a vision of what they're going to do there. And maybe they don't always tell you until a lot of times there's a breakdown. But you have that expectation too. Imagine if you're coming together and you find out that your employee has a skill that's not on their resume. It may be, I learned one of mine was great at web development. So you know what I did? I made him my webmaster for a while until he went out on his own and started doing it for other people. And I still hire him to fix my website when I need him, right? And so I've done that kind of thing too. One of my former employees said to me is that I cultivate people. And that's what I want you thinking about, is how do you cultivate your employees so that you get to move them into their best skills and have them contribute their best skills to you and some of their visions, because you may have very creative people with great ideas that would move your business in new directions. And as long as they're meeting the basic needs that you hired them for, then there's a huge opportunity for both of you to expand. So if you think about it more like a partnership where you all both have a lot of skills and offerings that can come together and create something beautiful, it's a different conversation than get in here, do the work, and do it the way I said, and without much guidance, but do it perfectly, right? We're humans. We need the interaction. We need guidance. So after you've made that action plan, 3 things that you're going to do in the next week to move that forward, or maybe with an employee, it might take a little bit more. It might take a month to meet certain metrics. It might take longer to do more training. But there's so many tools. That's part of why I put my online school up. I it's not necessarily going to be to train somebody to do a plumbing job, right? I'm not that skilled, but what I do is I work with you on creating conversations that cause breakthroughs. And I invite you to take some of my other courses. I invite you to reach out to me. Bottom line is I don't want you getting stuck in a conflict and giving up on what you really want. So go that now to action number 5, which is stay on par. Plan, act, revise, repeat until you get the results you want. And if you're not getting them, then please reach out. Again, I have my book, I have online courses, and I do one-on-one coaching as well as mediate disputes. I just want you to win. I want you to win at your life. I want you to win in the world. I think we can all win. I think we all have unique skills and interests, and there's plenty if we start sharing and collaborating. That's what I'm about. So just looking to see if we have any other questions. And I know we could get into some other ones. I do see some difficult ones that come up, like how do you deal, because I deal in the diversity and inclusion space too, and I've been dealing a lot with the racial justice and conversations about implicit bias for years. I got my ethno-religious mediation certification, and like you said, spent a couple of years over at the UN fine-tuning my skills in those conversations. Going into those, I will do these about once a month. If you want to see them more frequently, then just put some notes in there. Let me know that you want to see them on particular topics. If I have the course, I'll let you know about that. I do have some free courses in there too, and some free downloads. So there's lots of material out there, and I'm happy to promote other people's work as well, because there are just wonderful people out there doing great work. And you might not know that if you were looking on the internet, right? And just doing a blind search, and nothing wrong with the way the algorithms work. You just have to know how to work them, just like your life, just like your job, just like your car, your house, anything else, right? You just have to learn how to work it so that you get the results that are helpful to you. And so the biggest tip with that is just scrutinize, including my stuff. If it doesn't work for you, then don't do it. Or the other thing is just stay on par, right? So you didn't get the result right away. We go back to what could you tweak? Sometimes it's things that you think you should do don't need to be done. Sometimes it's that a small tweak. A lot of times it's in the way that we frame language. And so I do a lot of coaching on that, of like, how do you have a persuasive conversation that's more of an invitation than a mandate, right? There's a different way that most of us respond, especially as adults, to having someone mandate something. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you for helping break me out of a rough day. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to have my wine. Have a great day.